What if I told you that the reason you're mentally exhausted has almost nothing to do with how hard you work? Think about that for a second. Every day, millions of people wake up already feeling drained. They blame their job. They blame stress. They blame getting older. Some even convince themselves they're just lazy. But what if all of them are looking in the wrong direction? Because according to neuroscience, your brain can lose an incredible amount of mental energy before you've done a single minute of meaningful work. Not during an important meeting. Not while solving a difficult problem. Not even during your commute. It starts much earlier. It starts the moment you open your eyes. The strange part is that you almost never notice it happening. Imagine this. Your alarm goes off. For a few seconds, you're lying in bed. Nothing feels difficult. Nothing feels stressful. And yet your brain has already begun working at full speed. Should I get up now or hit snooze? What's the weather like today? Did anyone message me overnight? What time is my first meeting? Should I make coffee? Do I have enough time for breakfast? Should I check my email first? Or wait until I get to work? Individually, none of these thoughts seem important. They appear and disappear almost instantly. But your brain treats every single one as a problem that needs to be solved. Now here's something most people never realize. Your brain doesn't care whether a decision feels important to you. It only cares that it has to process one. And processing information always comes with a cost. Tiny costs, almost invisible, like drops of water falling into a bucket. One drop changes nothing, neither do 10, but leave the tap running long enough. And eventually the bucket overflows. Mental exhaustion works in almost the same way. No single moment ruins your day. It's the accumulation of hundreds of invisible moments that slowly drain your mind without you ever noticing. But if that's true, why didn't previous generations experience this problem on the same scale? After all, they had responsibilities too. They made decisions. They worried about the future. So what changed? That's where the story becomes far more interesting. Because over the last few decades, something about the way we use our brains has changed dramatically. Not our intelligence, not the size of our brains, the way they're forced to operate. Think about the average morning today. Before breakfast, you've probably looked at your phone, seen messages, checked the time, looked at the weather, scrolled through headlines, maybe glanced at social media, perhaps replied to one or two notifications. Each action feels so small that it's easy to dismiss. But your brain doesn't experience them as isolated moments. It experiences them as a continuous stream of demands. Process this. Ignore that. Respond to that. Switch here. Decide again. And again. And again. If I asked you what exhausted you yesterday, you'd probably mention a difficult conversation, or a long meeting, or too much work. You probably wouldn't say, choosing breakfast, or checking my phone 5 times before leaving the house. Because those moments don't feel exhausting. Yet neuroscience suggests they're quietly consuming mental resources all the same. But before you conclude that the solution is simply to make fewer decisions, there's something even more surprising. In fact, removing every unnecessary decision from your day still wouldn't solve the problem. And that's because decisions are only the first layer. Beneath them, another process is constantly running, one that's far more expensive. And unlike decision-making, it never asks for your permission. Imagine buying the most powerful computer on the market. You open only one document. You're barely using it. Yet somehow, the battery keeps disappearing. Eventually, you discover the real problem wasn't the document you could see. It was dozens of hidden programs running quietly in the background. Your brain works in a surprisingly similar way. Most of the work it does is invisible. Most of the energy it spends goes toward processes you never consciously notice. Which raises a disturbing question. If your brain is constantly working behind the scenes, what exactly is it doing? And more importantly, why is it doing so much of it now? Because once scientists began looking for the answer, they discovered something that completely changed the way we think about mental exhaustion. It wasn't just about stress. It wasn't just about sleep. And it definitely wasn't about motivation. It was something much deeper, something hiding in plain sight. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Because the biggest drain on your mental energy isn't what you're doing. It's how often your brain is forced to stop, reset, and start all over again. And that's where the real story begins. Most people don't realize this, but your brain has a limited workspace, a place where it temporarily holds information, a place where it keeps track of what you're doing, what you need to remember, and what you plan to do next. Scientists call this working memory, but a simple way to think about it is this. Your brain has a mental desk, and everything you need to actively think about gets placed on that desk. At first, the desk is clean. You have enough space. You can focus. You can solve problems. You can make decisions. But then life starts adding things. Remember to send that email. Buy groceries after work. Call your parents this weekend. Don't forget the appointment tomorrow. Finish the report. Research that idea. Reply to that message. Pay that bill. The problem is not that any single item is too heavy. The problem is that your mental desk slowly becomes covered with unfinished tasks. And eventually, your brain starts struggling to find space. This is why you can walk into a room and forget why you came there. Why you can read the same paragraph 3 times and still not remember what it said. Why someone can ask you a simple question and your mind suddenly feels blank. It's not because your brain stopped working. It's because your brain is trying to manage too many things at once. And here's where things get even more interesting. Your brain doesn't only store the things you are actively doing. It also keeps track of things you haven't finished, the email you haven't answered, the conversation you haven't had, the decision you haven't made, the problem you haven't solved. Even when you're not thinking about them, part of your brain is still keeping them alive. Almost like having dozens of applications running in the background of your computer. You don't see them, but they're still using resources. And this creates something researchers call cognitive load. The more information your brain has to manage, the less capacity it has for deep thinking. And this explains something many people experience but rarely understand. Why do you sometimes finish an entire day of work and feel like you accomplished almost nothing? Because being busy and being mentally productive are not the same thing. You can spend 8 hours moving between tasks, answering messages, checking updates, attending meetings, and solving small problems without ever giving your brain enough uninterrupted time to create something meaningful. Your brain was active, but it wasn't focused, and that difference matters. Imagine trying to fill a glass of water, but someone keeps knocking it over every few seconds. The problem isn't that you don't have enough water. The problem is that you never get enough uninterrupted time for it to fill. Attention works the same way. Your brain needs continuity. It needs time to build a mental model, to connect ideas, to move beyond surface-level thinking. But constant interruptions keep pulling you back to the beginning. And over time, this creates another hidden source of exhaustion, a feeling that many people describe as, I can't think clearly anymore. But here's the strange part. Most people believe interruptions are the main problem. They're not. The deeper problem is that we've trained our brains to expect them. Think about the last time you had 5 minutes of silence. Maybe you were waiting in line, sitting in a car, standing in an elevator. What happened? For many people, the first instinct is immediate. Reach for the phone. Why? Because the brain has learned that empty moments should be filled. Silence feels uncomfortable. Boredom feels like something to escape. The moment there is no external stimulation, the brain starts searching for something new, a new message, a new piece of information, a new distraction, and this creates a cycle. The more stimulation we receive, the harder it becomes to tolerate the absence of stimulation. The harder it becomes to focus, and the harder it becomes to truly rest. But this still doesn't explain the biggest mystery, because even if you removed every notification, closed every app, and spent your day in complete silence, many people would still feel mentally exhausted. Why? Because there is another system running underneath everything we've discussed. A system that doesn't care whether your phone is nearby. A system that doesn't turn off when work ends. A system designed to protect you, but in the modern world, maybe keeping your brain trapped in a state of constant activity. Your brain is constantly predicting the future, preparing for what comes next, looking for problems before they happen. And this ancient survival system may be one of the biggest reasons your mind never truly gets a break. Because the most exhausting thoughts are often not about what is happening right now. They're about what might happen next. And that changes everything. Your brain is constantly predicting the future, preparing for what comes next, looking for problems before they happen. And this ancient survival system may be one of the biggest reasons your mind never truly gets a break. Because the most exhausting thoughts are often not about what is happening right now. They're about what might happen next. And that changes everything. For most of human history, this ability was a superpower. The human brain survived because it could predict danger. It could remember what happened before. It could imagine what might happen in the future. A person who noticed the signs of danger early had a better chance of surviving. The brain learned one important rule: always be prepared. But the environment around us changed faster than our brains did. Today, the threats are different. Most people aren't running from predators. They're running from deadlines, emails, financial pressure, social expectations, unfinished tasks, future problems that haven't even happened yet. But the brain doesn't always understand the difference. To your nervous system, uncertainty is uncertainty. A dangerous animal hiding nearby and an unanswered email from your boss activate some of the same systems. Your brain sees something unresolved, and it starts preparing. This is where chronic stress enters the story. Most people think stress is simply feeling worried, but stress is actually a biological state, a survival mode. Your brain detects a possible threat and sends signals throughout your body. Your heart rate changes. Your attention becomes sharper. Your body prepares for action. In short bursts, this system is incredibly useful. It helps you perform. It helps you react. It helps you survive. The problem begins when the system never turns off. Imagine your home security alarm. If it activates when someone breaks a window, that's useful. It protects you. But imagine that alarm staying active every hour of every day. Eventually, the alarm itself becomes the problem. You can't sleep. You can't relax. You can't think clearly. Your entire life becomes organized around a threat that may not even exist. This is what happens inside the brain during prolonged stress. The alarm system stays partially activated, even when there is no immediate danger. And this creates something many people experience but don't understand. You finally finish work. You close the laptop. You sit on the couch. The day is over. But your brain doesn't get the message. It continues reviewing, planning, analyzing, preparing. What if I forgot something? What if tomorrow goes badly? What if I made the wrong decision? What if I can't handle everything? The body is resting, but the mind is still working. And this explains why some people can sleep 8 hours, but wake up feeling like they never truly recovered. Because rest is not only about stopping physical activity. Your brain also needs a signal that the danger has passed. But modern life sends the opposite message. Everywhere you look, there is something demanding attention. A new problem, a new update, a new thing to worry about. The world constantly tells your brain something important might happen, and the brain responds. Stay alert. Keep watching. Don't relax yet. Now here's where the story connects everything we've discussed. Remember decision fatigue? Every choice forces your brain to evaluate possibilities. Remember working memory? Every unfinished task occupies mental space. Remember context switching? Every interruption forces your brain to rebuild focus. Chronic stress makes all of these problems worse. Because when your brain is constantly searching for threats, it becomes harder to ignore distractions, harder to concentrate, harder to make decisions, harder to rest. Stress doesn't just drain your energy. It changes how your brain uses it. And this leads to one of the biggest misconceptions about mental exhaustion. People often think, I need more motivation. I need stronger discipline. I need to push myself harder. But a tired brain doesn't need more pressure. It needs fewer unnecessary demands. Because the problem isn't always that you are doing too little. Sometimes you're asking your brain to carry too much. But there's still one final piece missing. Because millions of people experience stress. Millions of people make decisions. Millions of people use technology. Yet some people seem to handle the modern world better than others. Why? Why can one person spend hours focused on a difficult task, while another person feels exhausted after answering a few emails? Why can some people disconnect, while others feel like their brain is always running? The answer is not intelligence. It's not personality. And it's not simply discipline. The difference comes from something much deeper. The way your brain manages attention itself. Because in the modern world, the most valuable resource is no longer information. Information is everywhere. The rare resource is the ability to control what your brain pays attention to. And when that ability is constantly being interrupted, something surprising happens. You don't just lose focus, you lose mental energy. And when all these systems combine, decisions, distractions, unfinished thoughts, and constant prediction, they create the exact feeling so many people experience today. A mind that is tired, even when the body is not. And now we can finally see the full picture. But understanding the problem is only the beginning. Because the next question is the one that matters most. If modern life is exhausting our brains, what can we actually do about it? And the answer is not what most people expect. Most people believe the solution to mental exhaustion is simple. Sleep more, take a vacation, drink less coffee, become more organized. And yes, these things can help, but they don't address the deeper problem. Because if the real issue was simply being tired, then one good night's sleep would fix everything. But you've probably experienced this yourself. You sleep, you rest, you take time away, and yet, your mind still feels heavy, still distracted, still overloaded. Why? Because the modern brain doesn't just need rest. It needs recovery, and those two things are not the same. Rest means stopping. Recovery means rebuilding. A phone with 10% battery doesn't recover just because you stop using it for a few seconds. It needs time. It needs the right conditions. Your brain works the same way. It needs moments where it is not constantly reacting, not constantly deciding, not constantly processing new information. It needs space. This is why some of the most powerful moments for the brain are often the simplest ones. A walk without a phone, a quiet morning, a conversation without distractions, a few minutes where nothing is demanding your attention. At first, these moments can feel uncomfortable because your brain has become used to constant input. But that discomfort is actually a sign. It means your brain is adjusting, like a room that feels too quiet after leaving a loud concert. The silence isn't the problem. The noise was simply covering up what silence feels like. The goal isn't to eliminate technology. It isn't realistic. And technology itself is not the enemy. The problem is losing control over where your attention goes. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you have. Because whatever receives your attention shapes your thoughts. Your thoughts shape your decisions. Your decisions shape your life. And if you constantly give your attention away without choosing where it goes, you slowly lose control over your own mind. So what can you actually do? The first step is not adding more habits. It's removing unnecessary pressure. Your brain already has enough things competing for space. Start by creating moments where nothing is asking anything from you. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Stop checking your phone during every empty moment. Give yourself periods of uninterrupted focus. Not because productivity is everything, but because your brain needs time to function properly. The second step is reducing the number of open loops in your mind. Remember the mental desk we talked about earlier? You don't need to finish everything immediately. But your brain needs to know that important things are stored somewhere. Write things down. Create systems. Move responsibilities out of your head and into the world. Because your brain is designed for thinking, not for acting as a storage device for every unfinished task in your life. The third step is learning to tolerate boredom again. This may sound strange, but boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is where the brain often begins processing, connecting ideas, reflecting, creating. Some of history's greatest ideas didn't appear during constant stimulation. They appeared during walks, during quiet moments, during time when the mind was allowed to wander. A brain that is constantly entertained never gets the chance to think deeply. And this brings us back to the beginning. The reason you're mentally exhausted is not because you are weak. It's not because you lack discipline. It's not because you aren't trying hard enough. Your brain is responding exactly as it was designed to respond. To information, to uncertainty, to demands. to problems. The difference is that the modern world has created more of these things than the human brain has ever experienced before. For thousands of years, humans had to protect their attention from physical threats. Today, we have to protect it from invisible ones. Notifications, distractions, endless information, constant expectations. The battle has changed, but the importance of attention has not. The most valuable skill of the future may not be learning more. It may be learning what to ignore, because a distracted brain cannot think deeply. A constantly stimulated brain cannot truly rest, and an exhausted brain cannot perform at its best. Your attention is the gateway to everything you experience. Protect it, and you protect your ability to think, to create, to make decisions, to be present. So the next time you feel mentally exhausted, don't just ask, how can I work harder? Ask, what is constantly demanding my attention? Because the answer to that question may reveal what has been draining you all along. But this leads to an even bigger question. If modern life is constantly competing for your attention, what is it actually doing to the way your brain focuses? Because something strange is happening. More people than ever have access to unlimited information, yet fewer people feel capable of concentrating deeply. And the reason why reveals one of the biggest changes happening inside the modern brain. That's what we'll explore next.